Lucas Whitaker was an ordinary guy, ordinary job, ordinary life. A few years after college, he'd taken a position at a seemingly mundane corporation, Kessler Hayes, dealing in business solutions. Lucas wasn't quite sure what that meant, but the paycheck was decent, and he didn't ask too many questions. That's where his downfall began. It started small. People in the building seemed off. Faces were slightly blurred in his periphery, features stretched unnaturally when they moved. The first time he noticed it, he wrote it off as exhaustion. His job was demanding, with long hours and strict deadlines, but when the faces kept twisting, Lucas began to doubt his sanity. One evening, while working late, he decided to investigate. He accessed files on his supervisor's computer, files that were encrypted with symbols he'd never seen. They almost looked like runes, ancient and sinister. Lucas copied some of them, intent on researching later, but when he looked up, he saw his supervisor, Mr. Radcliffe, watching him from across the office with an expression of dark amusement. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Mr. Whitaker," Radcliffe said, his voice echoing with something that didn't belong in a human throat. From that point on, everything changed. As he continued his work, Lucas began to piece together patterns. The employees at Kessler Hayes didn't just avoid sunlight, they recoiled from it. No one ever talked about family or life outside work, and they all seemed empty. Cold. Each of them had an uncanny ability to anticipate his every move, answering questions he hadn't asked yet, knowing where he would be before he arrived. One night, Lucas stumbled upon a hidden door in the basement, shrouded in darkness and covered in the same runic symbols. The air around it was thick, suffocating, as if it had absorbed centuries of whispers and secrets. Against every instinct, he opened it and descended into the unknown. The room was lined with ancient books, each one filled with scripts of summoning rituals, spells to trap and enslave souls, and names of demons he'd only read about in myths. But among the pages was something far more disturbing. Documents of his own hiring process, notes on his personality, and a file labeled Prime Candidate. His heart raced as he read. It wasn't a job that had brought him here, it was something much darker. Lucas was chosen for his innocence, his malleability, his potential to see things as they were meant to be seen. He wasn't just working for Kessler Hayes, he was being groomed by them, shaped for a purpose he couldn't yet comprehend. The next day, he confronted Radcliffe. "What are you?" he demanded, voice shaking. Radcliffe smiled, a smile that never reached his eyes. "We are what has always been here, Mr. Whitaker. Your kind merely put a name to it." That night, as he tossed in bed, visions began to assault him. He saw demons walking among humans, seamlessly blending in. Their skin flickered with every step, momentarily revealing the horrors that lay beneath. Some had rows of eyes that watched everything, others had elongated limbs that reached far beyond natural limits, and a few had mouths full of teeth that seemed to stretch infinitely. The visions came every night, each one more intense. Lucas began to fear sleep itself, but exhaustion eventually won, dragging him back into the horrors each night. He knew he was descending into madness, yet he couldn't stop digging for answers. The final piece fell into place during an office celebration. He stood in the crowded room, and for the first time, he saw them all as they truly were. Their eyes glowed with an inhuman light, their skin rippled, and their smiles stretched too far. Everyone was a demon, everyone but him. He realized then that he was trapped in a cage of his own making. Lucas wasn't working for Kessler Hayes, he was being observed, toyed with, and studied. He was an anomaly among monsters, a rat in a labyrinth where escape was never an option. But Lucas wasn't about to give up. In his late-night research, he discovered that certain spells could bind demons, limiting their power. He prepared a small ritual, something basic but potent, with symbols he'd meticulously copied from the forbidden books in the basement. If he could just weaken Radcliffe, maybe he'd have a chance to flee. On the night of his plan, he lured Radcliffe into the basement under the pretense of wanting to fully understand his place in the company. Radcliffe's voice oozed with mock concern. "Are you all right, Mr. Whitaker? You seem Frayed. Lucas nodded. I just want to understand. The ritual began as he spoke. He muttered the incantations under his breath, marking the ground with chalk. But halfway through, Radcliffe's face split into a grotesque, gaping smile. Did you think we hadn't been watching? Before Lucas could finish, other employees appeared in the basement. They surrounded him, eyes blazing, their forms twisting until each one looked more nightmarish than the last. Radcliffe laughed, a sound that shook the very walls. You are special, Mr. Whitaker. You see us, where others cannot. You have potential, more than any human we've encountered in centuries. With a gesture, Radcliffe summoned a writhing black mist from the depths of the room. It coiled around Lucas, slipping into his nose, his mouth, his eyes. He felt it crawling through his veins, reshaping him from the inside out. He screamed, a sound that echoed endlessly through the dark corridors of Kessler and Hayes. When he awoke, he was different. He looked at his hands and saw them flicker, their skin stretching to reveal something monstrous beneath. The truth settled over him like a shroud. He was no longer human. He was now one of them, and as he walked out of the building, blending seamlessly with the city's inhabitants, he knew that the world would never be the same. The demons had claimed him, turned him into their own, and no one would ever know.